Today on the Videomaker podcast, Chris and I talk about cinema cameras versus smartphones. This is a topic that has come up over and over and over again over the years, and there's always something new to say about it, I think. So we're talking about it again. We've been talking about this, for almost 10 years. People have been wondering about how good is the image quality of a smartphone? How does it compare to the top of the line cinema cameras? So we talk about all the pros and cons of both cinema cameras and smartphones. These are polar opposites here on the spectrum of cameras. But actually there is a transition that a lot of people go through where they start on a smartphone and they work their way up to a cinema camera. So we talk about, the technology behind it, but also when is the right time to actually make that transition. And, we talk about that and we kind of gloss over all the cameras in between. But if you are making that transition, hopefully this episode will give you a little bit of guidance about when you should consider making the leap over to cinema cameras. As always, if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, we love it if you went to your favorite podcast app and hit the follow button or the subscribe button or the little heart button or whatever they have in your app to make sure that the episode is delivered straight to your mobile device. Every time we put out an episode, it will be really convenient for you, and it's also really good for us. So win-win, right? Might as well do it. So with that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Videomaker podcast. I'm Mike Wilhelm, and with me, as always, is Chris Monlux.
Hello.
Chris, so yet again, another episode and another audio setup.
Yeah, a different microphone. That's for me. Now you're just doing this is like your standard setup we did before we started screwing around with all this stuff, just going into the Procaster or the Podcaster. This is the SE Electronics V7. It's supposed to be a competitor with the SM58. And this is the first company that was like, no, we want to put our mic up against the SM58. So we're listening to that. And I wanted to hear, I've been having all these expensive mics. This is like, sub $100 mic. And then I have their inline mic preamp, which is, I think, 25 dB or something like that, just to see how it all sounds. It actually sounds pretty good. I'm pretty surprised. Just point it in my direction and start sounding good. So,
it's one of these things where we make these changes and we'll go, hey, everyone notice the changes. And actually the best bit of feedback is no feedback on this kind of stuff. If no one's complaining, it's probably pretty good.
Yeah.
Or at least it's good enough.
Or it's up to their expectation.
Yeah.
At least.
People will quickly complain if there's an issue.
Oh yeah. If it sounds bad, like you can get away with it sounding fine, but I think when it sounds great, you might get people to comment on that, but you're definitely going to get people commenting if there's a bunch of hiss and pops and just bad sounding recording or real low or anything like that.
So this is a case where we're testing something that is maybe most likely to get us complaints because of bad sound, which is cheap, inexpensive equipment.
Yeah.
But actually, to my ears, it sounds pretty dang good.
Yeah, it sounds good. I mean, I think at this point, it's kind of like volume. I don't know, like if it's...
Oh, yeah. By the way, can you turn down my headphones just a little bit? That is one thing. It is a little hot.
Let's see here. I got to turn myself down a little bit there, and then you're number one. Cool. So I'm not blowing your ears out.
By the way, one thing we have never done on this episode or this show, I don't think, is make podcast equipment recommendations.
Yeah.
One thing it seems like we've been getting just incredible value out of is the Rode. I can't read that. I don't have my glasses on. The Podcaster.
The Podcaster, yeah.
Basically the podcast dedicated podcasting mixing board recorder.
Yeah, it's got preamps, recorders, got sound effects, headphone amp. It's all pretty cool, and there's. It was kind of the first of its kind, and now their Zoom makes some. I think their Roland might make one that's similar, but it's it's kind of handy in the idea of like if you're doing podcasting to have a dedicated thing that has all the ways you want to connect to it. Like we can do Bluetooth and USB and all the rest to it, which is pretty rad. I wish it had Bluetooth headphones.
Oh yeah,
I think that's like the next thing. I've actually been looking into like for my home recording studio. I'm like, I have some awesome Bluetooth headphones. I don't want to have a cable. Like I hate getting pulling equipment off the table or whatever. Yeah. And it's just not there. But usually the quality of Bluetooth, the transmission isn't as good as you can get from a cable. So I think that's probably the idea. But
I think latency might be the only issue because if you're listening to it as you're recording, who cares if the quality's not great? It's not recorded that way.
Yeah,
you know,
that's
you're
true.
just hearing your own voice, right?
If you're using it just for monitoring or whatever, if you're using, like for me, I'm like the recorder. So I'm also, the engineer there. I'm trying to get it to sound as good as possible. So I want a good set of headphones for that. But yeah, you're right. As far as if it's about latency, if I have a weird delay on my voice when I'm talking, I wouldn't be able to handle that at all.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's like one of the bedrock pieces of equipment we use is this Rode Podcaster.
Podcaster
Pro.
We've changed out all of our cameras, most of the mics. I mean, like all the way we've set up this since we've started. So now like 86 or 7 episodes. And it's been the thing that has been like the reason why we could do it.
Yeah. Like
before we were trying with I think we were using a Zoom and we were going all sorts of different ways and it was fine, but this really made a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, on to the topic of the day, which is actually cinema cameras versus smartphones.
Yeah, I was thinking about buying a new Ari Alexa, and then I thought, why not I just buy an iPhone?
Yeah.
I thought, I could save some money. It's easier to carry in my pocket, Yeah. Maybe not. Maybe I'm not making that choice.
Yeah, this is one of those things where this question comes up all the time. In fact, I think, maybe since I started working at Videomaker back in 2012, this same topic might have been coming up when people were talking about like the shootouts between the iPhone and the Red at the time. And so, the question keeps arising, or at least to me, like, why are we even thinking about this, or why are we talking about this generally, right? Yet it still comes up. People are still interested, I guess.
It's David against Goliath. There's, as far as the ideas of heads up, you couldn't get too far away from each other as like both sides of the spectrum of a cinema camera to a phone. You have like this thing that does a lot of things and it's a camera. And then you have this other thing that's just a camera. You would think there's no competing, but I think the further we get along in time, the more justification there is for the phone, right? There's just so many more tools that are happening in a phone that are far more easily available and applicable. I mean, from the filters that are in, all the different softwares from Instagram to Snapchat or whatever that you can, now do touch up on your face. To like the really super easy workflow that is like using your phone as the all-in-one, right? Is like, I can shoot something, edit something, and post something all from the phone. I can't do that with my Red.
Yeah. Yeah. When we're talking about like, why are we even discussing this? That certainly is one, in that there's just all kinds of incredible new technology going into phones at a much faster rate than cinema cameras. But beyond that, I would say, part of it probably comes down to the fact that everyone has a smartphone. Every beginning filmmaker, videographer, whatever you want to call yourself, everyone has a smartphone, and everyone wants to believe that their smartphone is very good and very close to a cinema camera in quality. And so when you see these things pop up, you're kind of hoping, at least I'm hoping.
Oh, yeah.
I hope it turns out that like no one can tell the difference, right? Because I got my cell phone and I don't have a Red.
That's because you're gullible.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
That's Apple fooling you.
Yeah, and it's only the reverse where it's like, you're one of the very few people that got your hands on a Red or own a cinema camera of any kind. Frankly, if you own a Blackmagic Pocket cinema camera, you're still in an extreme minority. Even you then want to watch these videos or listen to these discussions like we're about to have for some validation. Like, okay, my money was well spent.
Yeah, but I think there is. It's really interesting. I think because the way the technology's inspiring others is we're for the longest time we've been trying to push cinema features into a phone, right? Like now with the Sony Xperia cameras, they have 10-bit internal. There's apps that allow you to shoot in log. So there's some features that like you never would think anybody like the general public is asking for 10-bit or log. I don't see the social media maven that is really clamoring for those things, but someone that's coming from a image capture background, I think you start going, oh, but those are such useful tools in production if you're going to make something. And if you are restricted to your phone, or maybe the project requires it, like till recently, it'd be kind of difficult to shoot vertical video with a regular camera. So I think there's a lot of different things that I think are now going the other direction now that are getting into cinema cameras. So it's I think it's a worthy argument that I think continually is the change of like why. I mean, the cinema camera is obviously the winner. I'm going to say that now. You know, if you got enough money to buy both, you know, I guess buy both and use the camera for a camera and use the phone as a phone. But there's a lot of times where the phone now will beat the cinema camera for the application, right? It's the application, but also the accessibility, I think, and that's what you're getting to, right?
Yeah. Well, the accessibility certainly is a big factor. And you know, I'm glad to hear, Chris, that you're saying cinema camera. I'll go ahead and take the opposite perspective, and I'll say phone. And I don't think anyone who's been listening to this podcast for a while will know that I'm a big advocate for, you know, this technology in the distant future. In that, if you are looking 30 years down the road at cameras, they probably look a lot like today's smartphones.
Yeah.
More like smartphones than they do like cinema cameras. But before we get there, maybe we should just take a quick pause to define what we mean by cinema camera, because there's a lot of different types of cameras out there. And even here at Videomaker, we debate about this maybe once a year about where to draw the line between you know, a high-end mirrorless camera and a cinema camera, or what we would call a camcorder and a cinema camera. But really what we're talking about is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, we might have to have this debate right here on the show, but we're talking about an interchangeable lens camera that is primarily designed to capture video.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know any cinema cameras that don't do anything other than like a still frame can be pulled from the video that's similar resolution. So I think, you know, you're talking about dedicated video camera, period. That's the first thing. One, it's just made for, and, you know, if you're a Red user, it's digital cinema, you know, motion pictures of any kind, right? Video, film, whatever you want to call it, is that it, you know, it's dedicated for that. It doesn't do anything but that. So you're talking about like the samurai sword versus like the Swiss Army knife, which is your phone, right? It does everything. It takes pictures. It lets you talk to your mom. Mm-hmm. It lets you, you know, date. It lets you, you know, order food. What doesn't it do? It doesn't make you happy, I guess. I've been looking for happiness in a smartphone.
In fact,
for
it
a
makes
long
you
time.
kind of sad, maybe.
Yeah, it makes my neck hurt really from looking at it mostly. But you know, I think that the benefit really is that same weakness, right? When you're looking at both ways. So cinema camera is definitely that dedicated place. Now you could go a step further and be like a cinema camera is only something that has global shutter or something. We've had lots of different places, and the line between that, like you said, a high-end mirrorless camera and a digital cinema camera really is a lot more blurred these days. Yeah. Really, that's more of a thing that the manufacturers are doing. They're just going where the line is. Otherwise, the general population is not going, oh, I don't have a cinema camera. I mean, that's definitely like how Blackmagic likes to sell their stuff. We're cinema cameras. That's great. And that is a great aspiration to have. But let's face it, like what Panasonic's putting out, the Panasonic Lumix SH or S1H, like that's a pretty robust cinema camera if you ask me.
Yeah, like what's the difference between an S1H and a BGH1? Right, like
screen and that's sensor size and lots of different things.
Yes, but this, well, actually, the S1H you can take photographs with.
Yes,
you know, the BGH1 is like a box camera. It's like a little modular thing, like a mini Red, right?
Yeah. If you didn't know, that's the camera that's shooting me.
That's why I keep looking over to the side,
referring to it.
Yeah.
And I think it's just. I mean, that's like so. It's something because of something it doesn't have. Like and I guess that's true, but I think that line is becoming more gray because just like the Sony A7S III and the FX3, same sensor, same capabilities. The form factor is really the biggest difference. It, you know, has a handle, has XLR inputs, some of those kinds of things where that's not even true of this BGH1. It doesn't have XLR inputs. The Red is not going to have that, but it's definitely a cinema camera. So the things that define what is, but I think the biggest thing is dedicated for video, but it's more of like high-end video, I guess. It's more of the feature set in that now then.
Yeah, so there's a few common properties of a cinema camera. So typically they'll shoot raw video. Typically, I think exclusively, they will have interchangeable lenses.
Yeah, I don't think there's any cinema cameras that's not.
Yeah, a fixed lens. Actually, there was one that Canon put out, the XA1 or something like that. That was, remember, it was like a little video camera with a fixed lens, and they were calling it like a C camera on a production.
Oh, no, that was the. Oh man, made 2 videos about it, and they have a 1 and a 2.
Yeah, whatever it was.
XC,
yeah.
XC90, XC10, XC100.
XC10.
XC10. Hey,
yep. There we go. Google to the rescue.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was it. I don't know if anyone would really consider that. That's really kind of its own thing. But
yeah, I mean, that was Canon trying to make a cinema camera with a fixed lens, and it didn't do well. So it's not really a thing.
So they have let's see, they have the interchangeable lenses. They tend to shoot raw video. One factor which they don't really advertise, but tends to be more of a thing, is they kind of are built for heat distribution.
Yeah.
So a still camera, a mirrorless camera, is not built for heat distribution. It's not meant to be running constantly.
Yeah, I mean, and that's changing, but the continuous record is necessary for a video camera.
Yeah.
It needs to be able to do the long takes or the short takes, whereas a lot of cameras, not any Lumix, Panasonic Lumix or Sony cameras anymore, at least the new ones, have time limitations. But, and that's like a limitation put on by the taxes in Europe. It's just a weird story. Yeah. But so, some of these things that draw the lines aren't really the lines that were drawn before a reason other than the manufacturer decided, I'm going to say this is a video camera, so I'm going to be paying a different type of tax.
Yeah.
But I think it's good though, because it actually helps the area be a little clearer. Though I think that the manufacturers, even on the way we connect with a lot of the manufacturers, that there's no longer as much separation between the cinema division and the consumer division, is that a lot of the products do a pretty clear gradient from the consumer into the professional pretty well. And I think they realize that that's actually a pretty big volume of that almost cinema camera. I mean, even the first FS7, they were calling that a camcorder. They weren't even calling it a digital, a cinema camera in that way. So, this is somewhat of a fluid space, I guess.
Yeah, and it's changing all the time, right? Like if we were talking about cinema cameras 4 years ago, we would say they got to be super 35 sensor, and that's kind of out the window.
Yeah, it's totally. There'd just be restraints that we have. But the same thing with phones right now, right? So you have resolution. I mean, 50% of people choose their phone based on the camera. Yeah. So, it is a big decision of why, and that's why the technology gets put into that area. If people didn't care about the camera on their phone, then it could be just ho-hum. There'd be no reason that they'd be putting investment into making the shot stable, or, make your shootings more stable, getting better, more rich colors, sharper image, offering multiple focal lengths. I think all that stuff, if you didn't have it, we wouldn't be having this conversation, because there would just be certain limitations you couldn't handle. The cool thing is you could rig a phone up, if you thought of a phone like a cinema camera, in the way of it's the brain, and then you put things on top of it. Yeah. So that's the recorder, and go from there. Then, absolutely, you could get a pretty robust working phone. But you're still talking about a very small image sensor. And I think that's really the biggest thing, is you're just talking about a small image sensor versus a big image sensor, a fixed lens versus interchangeable lens. And those are like the biggest defining things that will make them not really something you can compare. But everywhere else, they're pretty much point for point. The camera does the same stuff,
Yeah. So, if we're thinking about what are the specific, strengths of a cinema camera, just in general, even beyond, compared to a phone, but just generally, what are they good at?
Yeah. High data rates.
Yeah.
Which is your RAW and your high bit rate.
The bottom line is very high picture quality.
The highest.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, motion picture quality, and that's why they all fight to get that Netflix approval on the cameras, to make sure that if you're going to make something of any quality, it's going to be able to be delivered to those distributions that you need it to. That was a big thing for the longest time. I remember it was the show Jackass, that they had to figure out how to use these video cameras for a movie, right? Like they had a TV show and they had to figure out what the nice, and at that time it was standard def, so it wasn't like a real huge jump, but you had to figure out what could actually be blown up on a big screen, and that's what was making it. And so we've really, the quality of what you can show in the masses has gone down along with everything else. But if you have an idea, you want to make a true motion picture, you're talking about what the pros use, what they're using in Hollywood, what they're using on location. And they would, unless they were being paid by Apple or by Samsung or by Sony to use a smartphone on location, they might still be using it for some jobs. Don't get me wrong. I mean, if they need to do some vertical video stuff that's behind the scenes, likely they're going to use a smartphone, right? Why would you break out a big old camera to do that? That seems like an inefficient way to capture something that maybe doesn't need to be as high quality. And I think that's really one of the biggest things of like, why would you use one or the other, is like, what's the level of which this needs to be presented at? Yeah.
If there's one thing I've learned in, studying these cinema cameras over the years, is that filmmakers will go to any lengths to get the absolute best picture quality. They will sacrifice money. They'll sacrifice convenience. They will put themselves through all kinds of extra work. And so any other factor is not a factor other than image quality. So for example, you could say, well, you can put the best lenses on there. Well, you can kind of put the lens on whatever camera you want with the right adapter. So that's not a thing, right? You can go get some of the Canon Cine line lenses and put them on your phone, right? With enough of a rig and adapters, and you can get it to work.
That would be a very strange and probably not very stable setup, but
so if it led to a better image quality than the Alexa, filmmakers would do it.
Oh yeah, they'd be doing it already, but there's nothing to justify that, right?
Yes, exactly. Not currently, but at any rate, they will build this incredible rig to get all the components they need onto it. Like Red is a good example of this, where they just give you a brain and you got to piece everything else on,
and you make it to fit what you're doing. You don't. The good thing about that is you don't add what you don't need, right? You're not going to put SDI output on it if you don't need it. But so that means it has a lot of flexibility, right? So you can make it on a portable rig, it can go on a dolly, it can do whatever it needs to be, as big or small as you need it to be. And that's the idea of being able to get more capability out of this somewhat rigid thing. But that's how you get that quality, that standard of quality, right?
And now obviously there's some restrictions here, but still filmmakers will go to as far as they can to getting the best image quality. So, for example, you want to put the camera in your freezer to get that shot of opening the door. Okay, well, you're going to have to trim down your expectations about what kind of camera to use and all the components you're going to attach to it. But they'll still like, what can I squeeze into this refrigerator to get the best quality image I can get out of this refrigerator?
I kind of think the very first thing that the cinematographer thinks of is how we're going to cut the back of this off so I can use the camera I'd like for this shot. I mean, it's to that extent is like, I want to get this shot from inside the car, gut the car so I can fit the camera I want to get the shot I want. You might have this small little thing. I mean, of course, if budget's not an issue, but like, I think like you were saying, they'll even go and take less money so they have more budget for that for the sake of image quality. And I'm with that. I mean, I do. I definitely, if image quality is what you're going after, which I think when you have a specialized job as much as a DP needs to be or what have you, you start having, the goal is excellence is to be above what would be expected. And I think that's, it's harder to do the less robust your tool is, I guess.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's the thing when I was talking about stability, right? Like, well, the back focus might not be right on a cell phone if I put a crazy cinema lens on it, because they don't actually positively connect to each other. And as much as it might not change a lot, that little bit would keep you, that consistency would be the thing that would keep it offset. Mm-hmm. I mean, just not having a camera work the same way twice would get it banned from being on set, let alone the image quality being any different.
Yeah. And then the other factor, which is a little bit less of a factor, but still something, I guess, is the file formats. Yeah. Everyone loves Red Code RAW. It's so flexible and easy to use. But again, I would argue that most filmmakers would happily give up red code raw if another camera was vastly superior in terms of image quality. They would go, okay, well, it's going to be a pain to work with in post. It's going to take up a lot of storage space and all that, but I'm getting the better image quality. Some people, I mean, obviously not everyone's
you're talking about filmmakers that are practical here. I don't know if that's true. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm not terribly practical when I'm thinking about my dreams.
Yeah.
But I agree with that, but I think that there's also the other part, which is like a quality that will surpass time, right? So if you shoot at high quality, it's that the whole idea that my masters can be remastered at a higher quality at some point or what have you.
Yeah.
And that's what makes sense at a real high level. If you're making $100 million movie, you better be able to release it on the next 4 formats that come out.
Yeah.
Because you can make a lot of money on it if you do, versus not being available for that. I mean, just imagine people that shot lower quality and couldn't get onto the just HD from there. They couldn't make that transition because their stuff was shot on, some subpar thing. Now all of a sudden, I think of like some of the shows that I didn't see until all of a sudden DVDs came out, like Saved by the Bell, other than on reruns. They had to go back to the masters and ingest them and make sure that they didn't go and just get the last dub that they sent out after the last episode. They went to the masters. They, tried to do, if it was on film, doing the best film scans they could do, whatever it was to make that happen. And in this world now, to help yourself be ready for the future, I think a lot of times that's why the higher resolutions are being offered. It's not because the stuff's being delivered in that. Now, given some like special effects are really going to be beneficial if your stuff is in real high resolution. But as far as deliverable, there's no deliverable of an 8K video in any practical sense. There, at least as far as, mass media or anything like that. I mean, 4K in the US is somewhat rare. You're only finding that through your streaming services, really. So I know we're not into this, the phase of arguing against cinema cameras yet, but I would argue that that's true. I mean, that's one of the big benefits, right, of shooting at like 12K, right, is you're future-proofing. But an argument against that, and maybe this isn't the best example, but the prequels, the Star Wars prequels, Phantom Menace came out in '99, I want to say, shot in HD, 24p HD. And it was crap. So
yes. And also, obviously, if they want to come out in a 4K version, they can do all kinds of sophisticated upscaling that is maybe unattainable to the rest of us. But
Well, and the funny thing about that is I've saw Phantom Menace in Imax. And you could see the outlines of the, cells that they brought in, you could see all the rough edges that you wouldn't be able to see in any other way. But I mean, really, IMAX is a pretty hard challenge, I think, to most anyway.
You're going to see everything.
Yeah. Unless you're shooting on something specifically for that, that's just going to be the way the format goes. But I can say those things have the Phantom Menace, the first 3, they have not aged well with the special effects and all the rest. Like all that stuff really doesn't look. I mean, it looks older than stuff that's well over, like Jurassic Park. You look at the original of that; that's at least 10 years before. I think that was early '90s, right? So, and that stuff still stands up now. That's a lot of practical effects and others, but it's how you achieve your look is sometimes how well it is ready for the future. But let's face it, that's like the very few people are actually making choices that, those are the Spielbergs and the people that are working with really high end stuff. Otherwise, you're doing the best you can with what you have. And likely you're choosing to shoot raw because you have some need for it. Like the shot is in a really extreme dynamic space and you want to be able to give the colorist a bunch of, latitude for correcting it versus like you might not shoot that way if it's just everything's beautiful and in shot. You might not shoot in raw if you're shooting an indie or something like that. Like, okay, this can save us some budget on the editing side or on the storage side or whatever it is, or be able to get more work done in a day or whatever it is being chosen by that. So I think that like raw, I know for myself having a bunch of cameras that can shoot raw or high bit rates and stuff, I'm still not choosing them for every choice because the workflow is complicated and not necessary for all productions.
Yep. Yep.
And that's why the space, I think, for smartphones come in there is like, oh, wait, like 10-bit on there. Oh, my mirrorless camera, 10-bit. And 10-bit's still not, I don't know if cinema camera users are really going to be super, fall back on 10-bit. That's not quite raw.
Yeah.
But it's better than 8-bit, I guess.
So maybe a good segue to smartphones and their particular benefits. I mean, easy one here, right? They're ubiquitous. They're cheap. Anyone can use it. And the image quality is good enough.
Yeah, and it's getting better. I mean,
yeah,
it's every generation you see it from like, man, how can that little thing get that nice of an image? And we're getting more and more resolution. Surely they're going to continue to do that because that's what the manufacturers like to do. They want to continue to justify themselves through new features, which is understandable.
Yeah.
But it's ubiquitous. It's ready now, and I think the idea of if I want to tell a story, I can start making a story right now. I don't have to plan. For me, that's the difference between if I'm shooting something with my phone, I'm capturing a memory. I'm not going to go, let me break out my C200 to capture this moment of my son. And the moment's already gone. So it's not even a good tool for that, right? But more so like just for anyone that wants to tell a story. This weekend, my son wanted to start writing a movie. He's 9, so it's with the stuffed animals. But we shot it on our phone because he edited on his iPad. And that made sense for his understanding and getting into it and being able to keep on being excited about it.
Yeah.
And moreover, I think, for the amount of content that's being consumed on a phone, the content that's made on a phone looks pretty good on a phone. Like if you're talking about, you want to really wow someone, if the place that people are seeing your content is on a phone, you don't have to work as hard. I mean, really that resolution is going to be lost on most of the phones today. I think it makes a lot of sense if you're making content for social media. Most social media is ingested and used by the phone or by a mobile device of some sort. And I'd say all of the cameras in most major phones right now would look pretty great in all those situations. I think given enough light for the shot, I think that's where, small sensors in general don't do well. It's just low light in general is a toughie. But but for everything else, I mean, I've had some shots. If you have beautiful light outside, man, you don't even have to try. You can get a gorgeous, beautiful shot. There's so much already in there, as far as like stabilization. I mean, no one is even asking for stabilization. And, both Apple and I'm sure Facebook and all the social media were like, we got to build in some stabilization. So when people see some awesome footage, they want to continue to make or post more good footage. It wasn't for the sake of making better art, which is like how most cameras, I think it's so people want to continue to use their products. And so there's a little different motivation from the designer of the product than say for a dedicated camera.
Well, I mean, it just makes sense, right? For stabilization, for example, if Apple has stabilization and Samsung doesn't and all else is equal, even if someone doesn't even know what stabilization is, they know that the video that they make using the iPhone looks better than the video that comes out of the Samsung.
Totally.
Obviously hypothetical, but I don't know what Samsung does or doesn't do. But it's going to be like, oh, I like the video out of the iPhone. Yeah. Like, I'm going to buy that one next time.
Totally. Well, and of course, in this case, an iPhone in general and Apple does a really good job of all that finishing, all those little details that make that, which is the thing that makes a lot of people drawn to it. But, is it a better camera? Well, they're not making the sensor. I'm pretty sure that Apple's not making the optics. So, it's for them, it's more of the integration into their world and the Apple workflow and all that, which is quite strong. I mean, let's face it, if you have all Apple stuff, you're in a happy world of compatibility.
Yeah.
But if you have a few things that are Apple and a few things that aren't, you might not so much. And so, and of course that's by design, but it's painful for those that can't be all in on a product. And I can't say that there's any other brand that's quite as, like I want it all as Apple. Like there's like, you're going to own an Apple car soon. You're going to get Apple tattoos on your baby. And
for sure.
They want it to be a way of life, not just a product you buy.
There's something that happens with smartphones generally. This is the same thing with Google. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes, technically.
Yes.
That we have no idea what's going on. And what it does is that it produces a nice image. If we had an engineer, a software engineer in the room, they would maybe describe it to us as just like AI or machine something or other.
Learning,
It's not exactly my forte here, but there's magic happening behind the scenes with these cameras that just do incredible things that regular cameras can't do, right? So the one that is easy for us to identify is the fake depth of field.
Yeah.
Right. And I saw this feature years ago, like we all did, and was impressed. Like it doesn't look great. You can kind of see the edges where it's having trouble distinguishing what's foreground, what's background. But the fact that it does it on the fly and it looks decent, and especially amateurs will take a photograph with that and they'll be thrilled with the results.
Yeah.
That to me implied, wow, there's some great software going on here.
Yeah.
And I compare it to maybe the software that's on my phone versus the software that's in my car. I don't know if you've experienced this, Chris, but if you drive a newer car, the software in them, while it technically does a lot of things, really kind of sucks, right? Like,
yeah.
It crashes a lot. You press a button and nothing happens every once in a while.
That's why they're like including now, instead it's mirroring screen. So there's an interface in a computer, but really your computer's your phone.
Yeah, you want Apple to have made the software.
Yeah, exactly.
Or I don't own a Tesla, but from what I understand, the Tesla software is quite good.
Well, and you think about a Tesla, there's not much to it, right? It's batteries and some motors, right. Whereas a car that has a combustible engine in it has all sorts of things that need to be controlled by physical things, whereas this is a computer. It's mostly software. Tesla is a electronics company more than they are an automobile industry, a car. You really ought to look at Tesla, compare it to like how Apple or Samsung is doing then versus GM and them, because they make good, they know how to make cars, but it's more than that. And I know that's the idea of Elon Musk, is to make them that way. And of course, the quick response. I wish any electronic company responded the way he does. I want to, at someone at any brand and be able to have them update the firmware like the next week just because they thought it would be fun.
Yeah. So I guess where I'm going with this is Apple and Samsung, or not Apple and Samsung, Apple and Google make great software. And Canon and Panasonic and Sony don't make great software.
Or at least they're not known for it.
Yeah, exactly. So, the ideal world obviously is take a Canon camera and have Apple make the interface and the software and all that other stuff for it so that it can be super smart. But even beyond that, there's another factor which I learned about recently from an industry insider, which is that dedicated cameras will not be able to compete in the long run with smartphones, not because of the software, the computing power of a smartphone, but the fact that the smartphone is combining their software and computing power with multiple lenses simultaneously.
Yeah.
So when the device is able to use multiple optics to capture focus in different places and at different exposures, and then combine them using artificial intelligence, it can do things that a regular camera can't do.
Yep.
And it doesn't matter if you have an Arri Alexa. Arri Alexa, at least the one that exists now, cannot do the stuff that your iPhone can, because your iPhone is using 2 or 3 lenses at the same time.
Yeah. It's more than just your normal camera, right? There's a lot more. I mean, gyroscopes, just the movement of your phone, that gives the haptics. It knows to look at your face, all those things. Well, that's data that camera has that you don't have in a normal camera typically. And they're going to be able to use that information to like stabilize, to, all sorts of different things. That information can help lead them to others. So you have more sensors in there. It has, you can now, you take an image, you shoot something, it says where you are, can give a geolocation for it. There's lots of metadata that's really valuable that you'd never get with typical cameras. And, the best we can hope for right now is really great connectivity with our cameras and our phones.
Yeah.
That's like, I really, the red Komodo, I was really blown away at the connectivity and how great it works with your phone and stuff, but it works with your phone. Whereas like, it'd be great if the Komodo was just my phone, but then it would have to be big or what have you. I'm sure as soon as the technology of bringing that technology to a size and cooling, of course, is the big thing that we run into with technology and size, that you'll be able to do that. But I think there's a lot of that technology, like Red Code Raw surely could be in a smartphone, right? Red could, license, or they could make something like that. I imagine. I'm sure there's something of that nature, but would it be the same resolution? Would it be the same depth? Probably not there yet. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure, other than that their design, why they couldn't put it in something.
Yes, so it's likely that the picture on your smartphone looks as good as it does, despite having a tiny lens and an even tinier sensor, because of what software is doing in the background.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a big gap in quality between your smartphone and your cinema camera. But again, I'm just kind of maybe I'll loop back to my original comment about 30 years into the future, what's a camera going to look like? It's probably going to be one of these situations where it's using multiple lenses simultaneously and using artificial intelligence to improve the image quality, and perhaps small form factor as well.
See, I would say, what's a camera going to look like and what's a smartphone going to look like? Because 10 years ago, my phone flipped out, right? So even the aesthetics of a phone and what is a phone has changed so dramatically since it's even started. I think it'll be interesting. I mean, it might just be that we're all wearing glasses, and DPs will just be people that can really walk around in a neat way. I don't know. I would hope not. I think the dedicated tool is it's the physicality of our expression, I guess, in that way. So sometimes it'd be sad if it was like, I don't know, I guess it'd be exciting too, because the limitations that would be freeing as well. But, whenever an art or like whenever the paintbrush has changed, it's fun. But sometimes you don't think they get rid of a certain brush just because they invented a new one too. So.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So even beyond all that, the smartphone has another big advantage, which is it's always available to shoot right now, discreetly,
and connected to the internet.
Yep,
discreetly. It's ready to, and of course, form factors. The reason why phones are the way they are, or why we shoot vertical video, is because of the way phones are, right? So saying it's a strength that they shoot vertical video natively or easily is kind of like, that we'd be saying the same thing if camera shot vertical natively or whatever. Yeah. But you see that technology now going the other way. So we have the new Sony, it's got long numbers, VX1, or look it up. It's the new vlogging camera, interchangeable lens, but it's got blemish, filter, so you can make your face look a little bit nicer when you're shooting. That was a snap filter. That's not something that's been in a camera before. Now you can have that. It will do. It will put bokeh on your shot and blur out your background, but it's a filter, not through doing it with its aperture. Mm-hmm. So we're starting to see those things move into it would be cool if they're actually a hybrid of sorts, because there's some really great strengths to even the size of some of the cinema camera, of like, it's got more bulk to it. So it's, you can have a smoother movement on a dolly or something else, because you have to be able to hold it to the ground and get it in a smooth way or whatnot. But I guess if everything's got awesome, amazing stabilization, who cares?
The ZV-1.
ZV-1.
That's right. Yeah, so maybe we should just kind of like jump to the bottom line, which is, if you are developing your career and your skills, should you start using a cinema camera as soon as you can afford to use a cinema camera?
Yeah, if you're going from being a storyteller to a filmmaker, like you're making that leap to wanting to put this in video, use the tool you got. Use whatever you got available to you right now, because a number one movie never got there without a good story. I mean, if you don't have a good story, it can be beautiful. It can be made with the best tools in the world. Who cares? No one's going to want to watch it. But if it's got a good story, you'll be able to keep people around, and people will tolerate lower quality video at that. It's almost the easier way to get there is through a good story. Saying that it's not easy to make a good story in general, but if you focus on story first, the other stuff isn't as important and won't be as impactful as a good story would be. Bringing a good story versus just a good look and all the rest. The
single most important element of any good piece of motion picture content is the script.
Yep.
Bar none.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have that, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get anybody interested in it. It's not going to make money. But, of course, there are filmmakers that make great things with confusing stuff. So, a good pitch man's probably good too. But, it's not going to go anywhere once it gets released if it doesn't have that good story. Gimmick will only get you so far. And I guess that's what when you start considering things classics, things that really have been able to last the test of time. Those are the things that are, look for those places for the good stories.
Yep.
It's not the stuff that's like, that big blockbuster that was just a big flash in the pan that was, good timing or something. But, good art that stands the test of time is surely started with a good story and is not going to grow out anything else.
So if we take someone at their word that they're an incredible writer and director, and they're
you don't get there without doing it.
Yeah, for sure. But if assuming that they are, and they come to us and say, well, should I get get a cinema camera now? Should I shoot my next film on a cinema camera? I think the question to ask before that is, at least if someone was asking me that, is, can I see your lighting? Like if your objective is to have a beautiful image, I want to see your lighting before recommending a cinema camera.
Yeah.
Because lighting is such an important factor. And, we've talked about this tons of times on this podcast, the idea that a skilled DP can do a lot more with a smartphone than an unskilled DP can do with a cinema camera.
Yeah. Or a good gaffer could light up a good scene with practicals better than you could with the highest end lights. It's one of those things where if crap in, crap out, you can only shine a turd so much. I think that if you have good lighting and you have a good setup, it's just the same thing. Is what's more impactful, shooting with a beautiful camera or lighting correctly? And it's like lighting correctly. I mean, if you could just continue to take quality jumps on the camera every time you make a choice like this, like, okay, want good lighting or do you want a nicer quality camera? You choose the lighting. Okay, cool. You do that. You want a good story? You want a good camera? Okay, you have to take another step down. You would still have a final product that would be better with a subpar camera with good lighting and a good story than you would in any other situation.
Yeah, exactly. So, if we're looking at your content and the lighting is blah, you're using natural lighting for everything, I'm going to recommend first work on, if you don't have the equipment, get the equipment. If you don't have the skills, get the skills. But if you improve your lighting, it's going to be orders of magnitude better for the picture quality than the camera will. And I would describe this like kind of like a race car. I'm not a car guy. Actually, Chris, you could probably speak to this better than I can. But in racing, the teams focus a lot on squeezing every little drop of efficiency out of their car, right? Yep. Like they pull off every bit of weight they can while still being within the rules, right? And there's certainly like diminishing returns with that. Yeah. You eventually have to put in a lot of effort to get a little bit of extra efficiency, a little bit of better performance. And I would say the same thing is true with cameras. And if you think about just throwing money at the situation, you'll throw a hell of a lot of money at your camera setup for a little bit of improvement. And when you're at the top of the top, it's worth doing that. If you want to be in the big leagues and you're trying to win a best cinematography Oscar, then you're going to need to put a lot of effort to squeeze just a little bit more out of your setup. But beyond that, you got to get the fundamentals down before you bother putting in all that extra money, all that extra time, and heartache into just squeezing out just bits of more better image quality.
Yeah, I when you have extinguished all other ways to improve your content, then put your money into your equipment, sure. But it's when you're like, to get that Oscar, I'm gonna have to go full big. I've done, beautiful, everything's been gorgeous and that kind of thing. I'm going to do that next little thing, but likely it's probably more going to be the relationship with the guy that you got the camera with. That'll be more valuable than that. It might be even the money they spend to lobby for you to win an award is more valuable than that. I mean, a lot of it is ego. A lot of it is familiarity. A lot of times it's vanity even that you're doing it. I think I've told this story a bunch of times that we used to go and we'd shoot on a Canon 7D, the Mark I, but we'd bring our camcorder that was a professional camcorder, and people, whenever we pull it out, people were like, oh man, The pros are here. And then we'd use it just to record audio, and we'd shoot the rest of the video with the 7D because it was a far better picture, and people just didn't get it because it was impressive. This other thing looked like, of course, it looks like a professional's tool, but that doesn't matter. If my work doesn't look like a professional did it, what matters is the quality of the content, not what shot it and what went there, how you were able to do it. Getting back to lighting, I think, people get beautiful images with natural lighting. I don't think we're saying that. We're saying rinse and repeat. Give me that same beautiful shot every time you go out. Oh, I can't because it wasn't that time of day, or I caught that image. I've caught some images, beautiful images. I didn't plan them, but planning a beautiful image and then capturing a beautiful image is one you could do again and again. And that's the big thing about making a living doing this, is you can't just be good once. You got to continually be good, because you're not any better than the last work you did. And that's just what gets your next job, is the job you're doing right now, as far as the video work you're doing. So.
Yeah, and I will say, just to caveat the comment about natural light, some people can't afford all the lighting gear that they need, which is fine, and so they shoot on natural light because they just can't afford to do otherwise, and that's fine.
I would say get reflectors. Honestly, in that case, I'd be like, oh, $50, you got 2 reflectors. Now you are controlling your light, regardless if that kind of thing, and you're being intentional about what you're trying to do. It's not necessarily about buying equipment, but being intentional about what you're trying to do and being able to deliver that over and over and over again.
Yeah. And if you are shooting on natural light because that's all you can afford, and you are consistent with it, great. You're in a good spot. Maybe
you're doing your due diligence.
Maybe expanding your lighting setup, and investing some money in there is going to get you a little further than upgrading your camera. I think there's an argument to be made there, depending on the types of video that you're making, obviously, right?
Sure.
If you're a wedding videographer, probably don't need to do that.
Yeah, maybe not. Well, I don't know. I've been to a lot of dark weddings. It's weddings are actually somewhat of a hard one, because they always end up like starting in the day and going into the evening.
Yeah, that's true.
And so the quality of the footage goes down the less light you have. But the thing is if you're able to do good over and over again, regardless how you do it, great. Now it's time to improve either another technique or getting more equipment. So if you've outgrown your equipment, cool. That's great. That means you've improved and you deserve to move on to the next thing. Of course, deserve and afford are different things. But I think that, those bigger tools, if you're not able to get really great stuff out of something that's limited, when you're limitless, you better get a lot better. And if you're not able to make that big jump, then it might not be justified.
Yeah.
And I don't think that really people are choosing though between their phone and a cinema camera. I think you're talking about 2 different people that would never even consider their phone, and people that are having to choose their phone because that's the level they're at. And what I'm saying is that those that choose their phone have a lot of ability to do amazing work, regardless of what they're using. Whereas you better make something great if you're shooting on that cinema camera. So if you're, if you're practicing by shooting RAW, you're going to fill up all your hard drives. You're going to have all this time you're spending color correcting and everything, and you're going to get less time shooting, or you're going to less time writing a story, or you're going to have less time lighting and practicing those things. And, shortcuts are good when they save you money, but if they save you education or knowledge, don't take the shortcut.
Yeah. I think if there's one takeaway I would like to impart on anyone who is in that mode where they feel like they need to get a cinema camera, this industry can be elitist at times, right? Like, this is certainly the case when Red was kind of new.
The de facto, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like everyone wanted to make sure that the next person they hired knew Red, right? Like, we're going to shoot on Red, and if you haven't done Red, then you're nothing, right? Like, that kind of thing can happen, where people's skills will be judged on the equipment that they're familiar with. And I would say, anyone who is shooting on a smartphone should not feel pressured. I mean, maybe they are being pressured, but they shouldn't feel pressured, I don't think, to make the jump to cinema cameras just because that seems like what they should do.
Yeah.
Like, you should feel like you have permission to shoot on a smartphone, and you should not feel bad about it.
Yeah.
Anyone can do amazing things with their smartphone. with the right investment in, just building their skills as a storyteller.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of maturity in the idea of wanting to outgrow your equipment before you move on. And hopefully you're outgrowing it not for the demands of the job you're doing, but rather for you to be able to take the content to the next level.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I have both shot a lot of commercials. I've used a bunch of crappy cameras, and I tell you what, I could probably shoot on my phone a TV commercial, and it would probably do better and look nicer than most of the stuff I see on local TV. And that would be with no planning. And it's just because it's that experience thing. So, I've used a lot of other things, but I could grab a phone just as well, because the 3-point lighting doesn't matter what camera you're using. A good story isn't reflected in how the camera turns on, or how long it can record a image clip, or how you edited it, or what tool you used, or what your name is. Any of that stuff, none of that matters. It's just the story.
I'm reminded of a conversation I had with a buddy of mine who he and I have been playing golf recently. We took it up a couple of years ago as a hobby to share together. And I just have concluded that this is an industry where they've identified this group of people who they have a certain amount of money they want to spend on their hobby. And a lot of people who play golf have a lot of money.
Yep.
And so the industry has found a way to take their money, right? Like the reason that you can go out and buy a $700 golf club is not because that's what it takes to make an incredible golf club. That's what people are willing to pay for a golf club.
It's that someone's willing to buy it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, like, you can have this custom, you could do a swing and they go, oh, we're going to make this custom for you. Like, you can't go get, custom, tires for your car. There's just certain things you can't get custom made things. And all of a sudden you are at that level. I mean, golf is this is just a crazy thing. I mean, Rolex will pay, more money than they pay for anyone to reach fewer people.
Yes.
But they know it's a great ROI, good return on investment, because all those people are buying a Rolex because it matters to who they are.
Yeah. So, someone who's starting out, I bought the cheapest golf clubs I could get, right? And, as I'm learning the game, I'm playing a little bit more, there's always this, you talk to people and they're like, oh, did you go get fitted? You should go to such and such and get fitted. You're getting some new clubs now that you've been playing for a while and all this other stuff. And so I go online and I'm looking for golf clubs and all that. And I'm watching these YouTube videos and it's like, professional golfer uses 40-year-old clubs, right? Like, and guess what? They're freaking great at golf with 40-year-old crappy clubs.
Yep.
So what do I need to spend $700 on a club for? Same thing with filmmaking, right? Whoever is winning the best cinematography Oscar these days, they're going to take your smartphone and they're going to make the most beautiful looking shots you've ever seen, and with nothing. So what do you need the new camera for? You might be getting to that point in your career. If you are, congratulations, by the way, where you need to squeeze out every drop of production quality you can, go for it. But if you're shooting on a smartphone, you should not feel bad about it. There's no pressure to move up, to spend more money.
Now I'm going to have one argument against that. And just to be devil's advocate,
sure.
I get inspired by the gear I use sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. That happens.
Sometimes, because I've tested so many cameras and shot stuff, sometimes you'll just turn on a camera and you'll look through the lens and you'll be like, well, I'll be go. That's amazing. You'll start thinking like, man, I'm fantastic. This is and man, I really like using that camera because whenever I do, really beautiful images come from it. And it's like, well, maybe I should just give myself some credit and go, every time I use a camera, some beautiful images come out of it.
Yes.
And I happen to be able to manipulate this one to do what I wanted to do. But likely is, if you were that inspired by something that was cheap, it'd probably do the same for you. It's just kind of the idea of you manifest those things that you want in your life when you think about them hard enough. Not like you're going to be able to make the rain come down or something, but manifesting wanting to get a job really bad will make you try harder, to get that job. And that usually is what it takes to get that next level. So I think that aspiration, that excitement that you go, oh man, this thing. So try to let your gear inspire you regardless of it is. And that's more of the thing, it's like, cool. Well, let me, what can make me inspired to shoot? And then I will be inspired to use my equipment because that stuff was fun. I mean, I go on a lot of press trips and they always make beautiful things for us to shoot. and I always don't want to shoot them, and I want to go shoot outside where there wasn't someone that beautiful to shoot with beautiful lighting and all the controls, because I want to show what's this thing really do, because you got this controlled setup in here, and of course everything's my phone. I just took a picture. It looks great in here. Of course the footage is going to look wonderful, and that's of course the small manipulation that there maybe intentional, maybe not, likely is, but that's something that you got to know. You got to know what is actually bringing that quality. And I think we've talked about a lot of it, but is that, know what is making your stuff great. And I guarantee you most of the time, it's not because of the equipment. It might be the combination of the lens you used. It might be the amount of compression you're using. It might be the way you're lighting. It might be how good your actor is, but attributing all those things to your camera is probably not the greatest, because you're going to be disappointed eventually.
Yeah. And you know what, frankly, if you show, some of your work to people who are not video producers or directors, they don't know the difference.
Who would? No one would know the difference. I mean, other than shallow depth of field and that kind of thing, is, the end user, they don't know what camera you used. I mean, a good eye that knows, certain cameras could probably pull some of them out, but who cares? That's so outlier, like the majority of the public is not going to be thinking, why isn't this shallow depth of field? They're going to be watching your story and whatever. So, I mean, cool. If your uncle gave you, an awesome $40,000 cinema camera, go use it. I mean, get to use it. You that's lucky. You're going to learn some things about that, what it takes to use that camera. That could be, you get a lot more better image out of it, but it's also more difficult to use.
Yeah.
There's complexity that come with that too. So it's like, you might not be able to get that great image out of there, because quite frankly, it takes more knowledge and understanding to make that happen. And I tell you what, the DPs that I know that have made beautiful images, they seem to be more like math nerds and guys that really understand like the combination of lenses and sensors that they like to do. They're more of like a scientist, like a mad scientist, than they are, beholden to the tool they're using. They're making combinations of things to get that artistic thing. How do you make a unicorn? It's just a bunch of magical thoughts. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, maybe it looks like might be severely over time.
Yeah. It's funny. We talked about this. We're like, how long are we going to talk about? Well, we've talked about it for 30 minutes or something.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been an hour. So thanks for tuning in if you have.
Yeah. For sure. So, thanks for hanging with us if you've been listening this long, and we'll catch you next time. Big thanks to everyone for listening. Hey, if you want to support the podcast, the best way to do that is to sign up for our newsletter. You can get that at videomaker.com/enewstoday, and you'll be put onto our newsletter list. We send you an email a few times a week with all kinds of learning materials, product reviews, buyer's guides, you name it, straight to your inbox. So check that out, videomaker.com/enewstoday, and you will be on the list. So for Chris Monlux and everyone here at Videomaker, I'm Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker podcast. We'll catch you next time.